Vikram Malhotra sat in his corner office, the Lahore skyline stretching before him through floor-to-ceiling windows. At 32, he had built Malhotra Developments into one of Pakistan's most successful real estate companies. The evening sun cast long shadows across his desk, which was covered with blueprints and contracts. His phone buzzed for the 5th time that hour. It was his mother again. With a deep sigh, he answered. "Yes, Ami?" "Vikram, you can't keep avoiding this conversation," his mother said, her voice a mixture of worry and frustration. "Your father and I aren't getting any younger. We want to see you settled before—" I know, Vikram cut in, rubbing his temples. This was a conversation they'd been having with increasing frequency over the past year. "But I'm busy building our company. Marriage can wait. Life is not just about business, Beta. There's more to happiness than money and success." Vikram looked at the photo frame on his desk, his parents on their 35th wedding anniversary, smiling, hands intertwined. They had an arranged marriage too, like most people in their community, and they were happy. "Fine," he finally said. "Show me the proposals you've shortlisted." His mother's excitement was almost tangible through the phone. "We found the perfect match. The Khan family, they own that big textile business. Their daughter Aisha is well-educated, studied abroad. Very respectable family." Vikram only half listened as his mother continued listing the Khan family's credentials. Business connections were important, he supposed. It would be a strategic alliance like any other business deal. "Send me her details," he said, already turning his attention back to the contract on his desk. The next day, a folder arrived at his office. Inside was information about the Khan family and a single photograph of Aisha Khan. Vikram flipped it open, while on a call with investors, barely glancing at the picture. It was blurry and taken from a distance, showing a woman in modest clothing with her head slightly down. Nothing remarkable stood out to him. She seemed plain, perhaps even unattractive, but Vikram barely registered this fact. What caught his attention was her educational background. A PhD in environmental engineering from a prestigious university in London. "At least she's smart," he muttered to himself after ending his call. That was something he valued. His assistant knocked on the door, reminding him of his next meeting. Vikram closed the folder and tucked it into his briefcase. The matter settled in his mind. If his parents approved and the family connections were beneficial, what did looks matter anyway? That evening, his parents invited him for dinner. His mother could barely contain her excitement as she served his favorite dishes. "So, what do you think of Aisha?" she asked, watching his face carefully. "She seems fine," Vikram replied non-committally, helping himself to more food. "Her education is impressive." His father cleared his throat. "The Khans are very respected, son. This alliance would be good for everyone. And from what we hear, Aisha is a lovely girl. Kind, intelligent, well-mannered. If you both approve, I have no objections," Vikram said, his tone businesslike. "I trust your judgment." His mother's face fell slightly at his lack of enthusiasm. "Beta, this is your life partner we're talking about, not a business contract." Vikram softened a little at the disappointment in her voice. "I know, Ami, but you and Papa had an arranged marriage too, and look how well that turned out. I'm sure Aisha and I will get along fine." Later that night, as Vikram drove back to his apartment, he wondered if he was making a mistake. Marriage had never been a priority for him. Women had come and gone in his life. Beautiful, sophisticated women who were attracted to his wealth and status. None had made him feel anything beyond temporary enjoyment of their company. Perhaps an arranged marriage was better after all. No messy emotions, just a practical arrangement with clear expectations on both sides. The next week passed in a blur of meetings and site visits. Vikram barely thought about his impending engagement until his assistant reminded him about the meeting with the Khan family, scheduled for Sunday. "Should I move some appointments to free up your schedule for next week? I imagine you'll want time to get to know Ms. Khan," his assistant asked. "No need," Vikram replied without looking up from his computer. "Keep everything as is." On Saturday night, his cousin Raj called him. "So you're finally taking the plunge, huh? Let me guess, you haven't even properly looked at her picture." Vikram laughed. "You know me too well. It doesn't matter what she looks like, Raj. This is about family obligations and making a good match on paper." "You're unbelievable," Raj said, chuckling. "Only you would treat finding a life partner like acquiring a business property." "It's efficient," Vikram replied defensively. What's wrong with that? Nothing, Raj said. Just remember you'll be waking up next to this woman every day. It wouldn't hurt to at least be curious about her. After hanging up, Vikram took out the folder again and looked more carefully at Aisha's photo. The image was still blurry, but he tried to make out her features. She seemed to have a round face and her posture was slightly hunched. Not the type that would turn heads at social gatherings. Vikram frowned, a small twinge of shallow disappointment flickering through him before he pushed it aside. What did it matter? She was educated and from a good family. That was enough. The morning of the meeting, Vikram spent extra time getting ready, more out of habit than any desire to impress. His driver took him to one of Lahore's most exclusive hotels where the meeting was arranged in a private room. His parents were already there, dressed in their finest clothes, talking animatedly with another couple, who must be Aisha's parents. "Ah, here he is," his father called out as Vikram entered. "Our son, Vikram." Handshakes and pleasantries were exchanged. Mrs. Khan, an elegant woman with kind eyes, studied him with obvious approval. "We've heard so much about your business achievements. Very impressive for someone so young." "Thank you," Vikram replied politely. "Your family's textile business is equally impressive. I've always admired your sustainable practices." As the parents continued chatting, Vikram checked his phone. 3 missed calls from the office. He was about to excuse himself when Mr. Khan said, "Ah, here comes Aisha now." Vikram put his phone away and stood up, his expression neutral, prepared to meet the woman who would likely become his wife. He had prepared himself to be polite, to focus on her accomplishments rather than her appearance. He would be respectful and kind, regardless of how plain or unattractive she might be. The door opened, and for the first time in his adult life, Vikram Malhotra found himself completely unprepared. In the doorway stood a woman wearing a simple but elegant blue outfit. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, a few loose strands framing her face. And what a face it was. Not conventionally beautiful perhaps, but striking in its uniqueness. High cheekbones, full lips, and the most expressive eyes he had ever seen, deep, intelligent, and somehow both serious and playful at the same time. This couldn't be Aisha Khan, not the woman from that blurry, unflattering photo. But it was. She smiled politely at everyone and made her way into the room with quiet confidence. "I apologize for being late," she said, her voice soft but clear. "There was an interesting discussion about urban water conservation that I couldn't bring myself to leave." Vikram realized he was staring and quickly composed himself. What was happening to him? He never lost his cool like this. "Aisha, this is Vikram Malhotra," her father introduced them. She extended her hand. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Malhotra. I've read about your company's projects. Your riverside development had some interesting eco-friendly elements." Vikram took her hand, noting how firm her handshake was. "Please call me Vikram. And thank you, though I'm surprised you take an interest in real estate development." Something flickered across her face. Amusement? Annoyance? Because of my gender? Or because you assumed I only care about theoretical academic work? Vikram felt heat rise to his face. He who negotiated million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat was blushing like a schoolboy. Neither, of course. "I just meant, I'm teasing you," she said, her eyes crinkling slightly at the corners. "But yes, I find practical applications of environmental engineering fascinating. Theory is meaningless without real-world implementation." As they were seated, Vikram couldn't take his eyes off Aisha. How had that photo been so misleading? It was as if someone had deliberately chosen the worst possible image of her. And yet it wasn't just her appearance that had him off balance. It was her presence, her intelligence that radiated from every word she spoke. Throughout the lunch, Aisha spoke thoughtfully about her work, her time abroad, and her hopes to implement sustainable water systems in Pakistan's urban development. She asked Vikram insightful questions about his business. Not the usual polite inquiries he was accustomed to, but questions that showed genuine interest and understanding of the industry. When his phone buzzed again, Vikram, for the first time in years, ignored it. As the meeting came to an end, both families looked pleased with how well things had gone. Outside the hotel, as they were saying their goodbyes, Vikram found himself reluctant to leave. "Perhaps we could continue our conversation about sustainable urban development sometime," he found himself asking Aisha. She looked at him with those perceptive eyes, as if measuring his sincerity. I'd like that, she finally said with a small smile. On the drive home, Vikram's parents were jubilant. She's wonderful, isn't she? His mother gushed. And the way she spoke about her work, so passionate and intelligent. Yes, Vikram said quietly, still processing the events of the day. She is. That night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Vikram couldn't stop thinking about Aisha Khan, not just her unexpected appearance, but her mind, her quiet confidence, the way she challenged him. For the first time, he found himself looking forward to the prospect of marriage, not as a business arrangement or family obligation, but as something he genuinely wanted. And that, more than anything, shocked him to his core. The week following their first meeting passed in a blur for Vikram. For the first time in years, his mind wasn't completely consumed by work. He found himself thinking about Aisha at odd moments, during meetings, while reviewing contracts, even in the middle of important phone calls. It was unsettling for a man who prided himself on his focus and discipline. On Tuesday, he did something he'd never done before. He left the office early. His assistant's jaw nearly dropped when he announced he was taking the afternoon off. Is everything all right, sir? She asked, concern evident in her voice. Yes, everything's fine, he replied, straightening his tie. I just have a personal matter to attend to. The personal matter was a visit to the Khan family home. He had called Aisha's father that morning to ask permission to meet with her again. Mr. Khan had sounded pleased, if a bit surprised at the urgency in Vikram's voice. As his driver navigated through Lahore's busy streets, Vikram felt an unfamiliar sensation in his stomach. Was he nervous? Ridiculous. He negotiated multi-million-dollar deals without batting an eye. Yet here he was, palms slightly sweaty at the thought of seeing Aisha again. The Khan residence was an elegant but understated home in one of Lahore's older, more prestigious neighborhoods. Unlike the ostentatious mansions favored by many of Lahore's elite, their home spoke of quiet wealth and good taste. Vikram appreciated that. A housekeeper led him to a bright sitting room overlooking a garden. Aisha's mother greeted him warmly, offering tea and snacks. Aisha will join you shortly, she said with a knowing smile. She's just finishing a work call. Vikram nodded, trying not to look too eager. He stood by the window looking out at the garden when he heard the door open behind him. I'm sorry to keep you waiting, Aisha said, entering the room. She was dressed more casually today in a simple outfit, her hair in a loose braid over one shoulder. Without the formality of their first meeting, she looked even more striking. No apology necessary, Vikram said, suddenly aware of how dry his throat felt. I know how work calls can go. Aisha smiled, and Vikram noticed a small dimple in her right cheek that hadn't been visible during their first meeting. My colleague in London doesn't seem to understand time zones, she said, gesturing for him to sit. To him, any time is a good time to discuss water filtration systems. Vikram laughed. I have a partner in Dubai with the same issue. 3 a.m. messages asking about floor plans are not uncommon. A comfortable silence fell between them as the housekeeper brought in tea. Vikram found himself studying Aisha's face. Her features weren't what fashion magazines would call beautiful, but there was something captivating about her, an intelligence that shone through her eyes, a quiet confidence in the way she held herself. So, she said, pouring tea for both of them, what brings you here on a Tuesday afternoon? I'd imagine your schedule is usually packed. It is, Vikram admitted, but I wanted to see you again. The directness of his own statement surprised him. He was usually more guarded, more calculated in his interactions. Aisha raised an eyebrow, handing him a cup of tea. Why, our parents have already agreed to the match. There's no need for you to make extra effort. Her bluntness caught him off guard. Most women he'd known would have played coy, pretended to be flattered by his interest. But not Aisha. She wanted honest answers, not flattery. I enjoyed our conversation about sustainable development, he said, which was true, if not the complete truth. And I thought perhaps we could get to know each other better before the engagement is formally announced. Isn't that reasonable? Aisha studied him over the rim of her teacup, those perceptive eyes seeming to see right through him. It's reasonable, she finally said, but unexpected. From what I'd heard about you, I didn't think you'd be interested in the personal aspects of this arrangement. Vikram felt a prickle of discomfort. What exactly have you heard about me? That you're brilliant in business, driven, focused to the point of obsession, she said matter-of-factly. That you agreed to this match primarily to please your parents and secure a good family connection. And that you barely looked at my photo when it was shown to you. Vikram nearly choked on his tea. Who told you that? A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. Lahore is a small world, especially in our social circles. People talk. Embarrassment washed over Vikram. She knew he hadn't even properly looked at her picture. That he'd dismissed her based on a glance at a blurry photo. How rude and shallow she must think him. I apologize, he said stiffly. That was inconsiderate of me. No need to apologize, Aisha said, surprising him again. I understand. You're a busy man, and this is primarily a family arrangement. I didn't expect romance. There was no bitterness in her tone, just pragmatism. Yet somehow her acceptance of his behavior made Vikram feel worse. Still, he insisted, it was wrong of me. And I'd like to make it up to you by getting to know you properly now. Aisha set down her teacup. All right, she said. What would you like to know? For the next 2 hours they talked. Really talked. Not the polite surface-level conversation of their first meeting, but genuine dialogue. Vikram learned that Aisha had lived in London for 6 years while completing her education. That she loved classical music but couldn't carry a tune herself. That she was allergic to strawberries. And that her dream was to develop sustainable water systems for Pakistan's rural areas. In turn, he told her about growing up in the shadow of his father's business, about the pressure he'd felt to succeed, about his love for old Bollywood movies, a guilty pleasure he rarely admitted to anyone, and about his own dream of creating housing that was both luxurious and environmentally responsible. That's actually where our interests align, Aisha said, leaning forward with enthusiasm. Luxury and sustainability aren't mutually exclusive. The wealthy have the resources to pioneer eco-friendly living, which can then be adapted for more affordable housing. Vikram nodded eagerly. Exactly. I've been trying to convince my board of this for years. They still think eco-friendly means compromising on luxury. Maybe they need to see it in action, Aisha suggested. Have you considered creating a showcase property? Something that demonstrates how sustainable technology can enhance luxury rather than detract from it. As they discussed possibilities, Vikram was struck by how easy it was to talk to Aisha. There was none of the usual careful maneuvering he was accustomed to in his interactions with others. She didn't seem impressed by his wealth or status, nor did she pretend to know less than she did to make him feel important. She simply spoke her mind, listened to his, and built on their shared ideas. It was refreshing. And slightly intimidating. The afternoon light was beginning to fade when Aisha's mother discreetly entered the room to remind them of the time. Vikram was shocked to see it was nearly 6 o'clock. He couldn't remember the last time he'd lost track of time like this in a conversation. As he prepared to leave, Aisha walked him to the door. Thank you for coming, she said. This was unexpected, but nice. Would you like to see one of my development sites? Vikram found himself asking. The Riverside project we discussed? It's still under construction, but many of the eco-friendly elements are in place. A flicker of genuine interest crossed Aisha's face. I'd like that, she said. When? Is tomorrow too soon? Vikram asked, surprising himself with his eagerness. Aisha laughed, a warm, natural sound that made something in Vikram's chest tighten. Tomorrow works, she said. But don't you have a company to run? The company can survive without me for an afternoon, he replied with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. He hadn't taken 2 afternoons off in the same week since, well, ever. The next day, Vikram picked Aisha up himself rather than sending his driver. She came out of the house wearing practical clothes and flat shoes, her hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Most women, he knew, wouldn't be caught dead visiting a construction site, let alone dress appropriately for one. As they drove to the Riverside project, Vikram found himself sneaking glances at Aisha's profile. In the natural light of day, without the formal setting of their previous meetings, she looked different. There was a glow to her skin, a liveliness to her expressions that he hadn't fully appreciated before. You're staring, she said without looking at him, a hint of amusement in her voice. Vikram quickly turned his attention back to the road. Sorry, he mumbled. It's all right, she said. I'm just not used to it. Especially from someone who initially couldn't be bothered to look at my photo. There was a teasing quality to her voice, but Vikram still felt the sting of her words. About that, he began awkwardly. I want you to know that It's fine, really, Aisha cut in. water under the bridge. But it wasn't fine to Vikram. He wanted her to know that he regretted his initial indifference, that he'd been wrong to judge her based on a cursory glance at a blurry photo. Yet he couldn't find the right words to express this without sounding like he was only attracted to her now, because she was prettier than he'd expected, which wasn't the whole truth anyway. Yes, she was attractive, but it was her mind, her confidence, her whole way of being that drew him to her. They arrived at the construction site, where Vikram was greeted respectfully by the workers and the site manager. He introduced Aisha as an environmental engineering consultant, avoiding the complicated explanation of their arranged marriage situation. For the next few hours, they toured the site with Vikram explaining the various eco-friendly elements of the project: solar panels, rainwater harvesting systems, natural cooling mechanisms inspired by traditional architecture but executed with modern technology. To his delight, Aisha didn't just nod politely. She asked insightful questions, suggested improvements, and even pointed out potential issues he hadn't considered. When she knelt down to examine the water filtration system, getting dust on her clothes without a second thought, Vikram felt an unfamiliar warmth spreading through his chest. "This is impressive," she said as they stood on what would eventually be the rooftop garden of the main building, overlooking the river. "But have you considered incorporating vertical gardens on the east-facing walls? It would provide additional cooling and improve air quality." "That wasn't in the original plan," Vikram admitted, "but it's an excellent idea." Aisha smiled, the setting sun catching the highlights in her hair. "I have many excellent ideas, Mr. Malhotra. Perhaps you should have paid attention to my CV rather than my photo." There was no malice in her voice, just that same teasing tone, but Vikram winced nonetheless. "I deserve that," he said, "and I want you to know that I deeply regret my initial lack of interest. It was shallow and disrespectful." Aisha's expression softened. "We all make judgments based on appearances," she said. "It's human nature. What matters is being willing to look deeper when given the chance." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun sink lower over the river. "Can I ask you something?" Vikram finally said. "Why did you agree to this match? With your education and capabilities, you could have chosen anyone, or chosen not to marry at all." Aisha considered his question for a moment. "My parents suggested it, and when I researched you and your company, I was intrigued," she said simply. "Your business practices are ethical. Your projects have potential for positive environmental impact. And everyone I spoke to said you were intelligent and fair, if somewhat work-obsessed. So it was a business decision for you too," Vikram said, feeling oddly disappointed. "Partly," Aisha admitted. "But also, I believe in fate and certain paths being meant for us. When my parents suggested you, something felt right about it." She laughed suddenly, looking slightly embarrassed. "That sounds silly, doesn't it? A scientist talking about fate." "No," Vikram said softly. "It doesn't sound silly at all." As they drove back to her house in the gathering dusk, a comfortable silence fell between them. Vikram found himself thinking about fate, about the strange turns life could take. If someone had told him 2 weeks ago that he would be willingly leaving work early to spend time with his arranged bride-to-be, he would have laughed in disbelief. Yet here he was, already dreading the moment he would have to say goodbye to Aisha at her door. When they arrived at the Khan residence, Vikram walked Aisha to the door. "Thank you for coming today," he said. "Your insights were invaluable." "Thank you for showing me the project," she replied. It was fascinating. They stood there for a moment, neither quite ready to part. In the dim light of the porch, Aisha's eyes seemed to hold a question, though Vikram wasn't sure what it was. "I'll see you at the formal engagement party next week." He finally said yes, she said, "and perhaps before then, if you'd like to discuss those vertical gardens further." "I would like that," Vikram said, a smile spreading across his face. "Very much." As he drove away, Vikram realized with a start that for the first time in years, he was looking forward to something that had nothing to do with business. The thought should have alarmed him, this deviation from his carefully structured life. Instead, he felt a sense of anticipation, of possibility, that he hadn't experienced since he was a young man just starting his career. The arranged marriage that he had agreed to out of duty and indifference was quickly becoming something he wanted with his whole heart. And it wasn't just because Aisha was more attractive than he'd initially thought. It was because she was brilliant, challenging, and utterly herself. The woman he had barely looked at in a photo, was now someone he couldn't stop seeing, really seeing, in all her complexity and wonder. And that, Vikram realized with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, changed everything. The days leading up to the formal engagement ceremony flew by in a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and stolen moments with Aisha. Vikram found himself inventing reasons to see her, discussing the vertical gardens for his riverside project, seeking her input on a new eco-friendly housing development, even asking for her recommendations on environmental policy books. Each meeting left him more captivated than the last. His staff had noticed the change in him. His assistant had actually gasped out loud when he told her to reschedule a meeting with international investors because it conflicted with a lunch he'd planned with Aisha. Raj, his cousin and company's legal advisor, teased him mercilessly. "Who are you and what have you done with my workaholic cousin?" Raj asked one evening as they shared a drink in Vikram's office. "The Vikram I know wouldn't leave the office before midnight for anything less than a natural disaster." Vikram shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "People change." "Not people like you," Raj countered with a knowing grin. "Not unless something or someone extraordinary comes along." He raised his glass in a mock toast. "To arranged marriages and the miracle of actually falling for the woman your parents chose." Vikram didn't argue. How could he when Raj was right? Somehow, in the span of just a couple of weeks, Aisha Khan had gone from being a business arrangement to being the first thing he thought about in the morning and the last thing on his mind at night. 2 weeks before the engagement ceremony, Vikram had a late meeting at his office with some international clients. It was nearly midnight by the time he finished. Too wired to go home, he decided to take a walk along the river near his office building. The night was cool and clear, the moon casting silver reflections on the water. As he walked, his mind drifted to Aisha, as it often did these days. He had just turned to head back when his phone rang. It was a call from his friend Arjun, a fellow developer who was working on a project near the Khan residence. "Vikram, sorry to call so late. I'm at the site near Garden Town, and there's a problem with the foundation plans. I know you've dealt with similar soil conditions in your Westside project. Any chance you could swing by and take a look?" Vikram checked his watch. It was late, but not unreasonably so, and Garden Town wasn't far. "Sure," he said. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. When he arrived at Arjun's construction site, his friend led him to a temporary office where blueprints were spread across a table. As they discussed the foundation issues, Vikram glanced out the window and realized they were directly across from the Khan family home. Most of the windows were dark, but a soft light glowed from what he guessed was the family sitting room. As they wrapped up their discussion, Arjun offered Vikram a cup of tea. They were standing by the window, chatting casually, when the light in the Khan's sitting room brightened. 2 figures entered the room, Aisha and a younger woman who resembled her enough to be her sister. Vikram didn't mean to eavesdrop. He really didn't. But the night was quiet. The window of the Khan's sitting room was partially open, and the sound carried clearly across the empty lot between the construction site and their home. He found himself frozen in place, unable to move away or alert Arjun to the situation. "I still don't understand why you're going through with this," the younger woman was saying. "You could have said no. Ami and Abu would have respected your decision." "I know that, Zara," Aisha replied, settling onto a couch. "But I told you I've researched Vikram Malhotra thoroughly. His business practices align with my values, and he has the resources to make real environmental change. Together we could do something meaningful." Zara snorted. "So it's a business merger for you two? Just like it is for him?" Vikram felt a twinge of discomfort at her words. Was that still how Aisha saw their match, as a business arrangement? "It started that way," Aisha admitted, her voice softer now. "But it's evolving." "Into what?" Zara pressed. "The man didn't even look at your photo properly, Aisha. What kind of beginning is that?" Aisha laughed, the sound carrying clearly through the night air. "To be fair, I did send the worst photo possible." Vikram nearly dropped his tea. "What? I still can't believe you did that," Zara said, giggling. "The one from Cousin Farah's wedding where you had food poisoning and looked half dead?" "It was a test," Aisha said, her voice turning serious. "I wanted to know if he was the type of man who would judge solely on appearances. I've spent my whole life being valued for my mind, for my work. I didn't want a husband who was only interested in my face." Vikram stood frozen, the teacup halfway to his lips, his heart pounding in his ears. She had deliberately sent a bad photo as a test, and he failed spectacularly, Zara pointed out. He barely looked at it. Yes, Aisha agreed, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It means he wasn't making his decision based on my looks. And now that we've spent time together, I can see that he values my mind, my ideas. He listens to me, Zara, really listens. Do you know how rare that is? Vikram felt a strange mixture of emotions. Embarrassment at having been tested without his knowledge, relief that she understood why he hadn't paid attention to her photo, and a warm glow at her words. She thought he valued her mind. And he did, more than she knew. So you're actually starting to like him? Zara asked, sounding surprised. There was a pause, and Vikram found himself holding his breath, waiting for Aisha's answer. Yes, she finally said, so softly that Vikram had to strain to hear. Yes, I think I am. He's not what I expected. Behind that serious businessman exterior, he's thoughtful and surprisingly open-minded. And the way he looks at me now, she trailed off. What? Zara prompted. How does he look at you? Like he's seeing something precious, Aisha said, a smile evident in her voice. Not just my face, but me, the real me. Vikram's heart seemed to skip a beat. He had no idea his feelings were so transparent or that they meant so much to her. Well, Zara said teasingly. The brilliant Dr. Aisha Khan, falling for her arranged match. Who would have thought? Stop it, Aisha said, but there was no real annoyance in her voice. It's still early days. We have a lot to learn about each other. But you're happy? Zara asked, her tone turning serious. This is what you want? There was a pause, and Vikram found himself once again holding his breath. Yes, Aisha said finally. I think this could be the start of something real, something good. And not just for business reasons. Then I'm happy for you, Zara said warmly. But I still can't believe your little photo trick worked out so well. Imagine if he had taken one look at that horrible picture and called the whole thing off. Both sisters dissolved into laughter, and Vikram felt his face grow hot with embarrassment. He had nearly done exactly that, dismissed the match based on that one blurry, unflattering photo. What a mistake that would have been, Vikram. Are you all right? Arjun's voice broke into his thoughts. You've been staring out the window for 5 minutes. Vikram snapped back to reality, setting down his untouched tea. Sorry, just thinking about the foundation issue. Listen, I should go. Early meeting tomorrow. He made his escape quickly, his mind racing. As he drove home, Aisha's words kept repeating in his head. She had deliberately sent a bad photo as a test. She was starting to have real feelings for him. She thought he saw her, really saw her, did he though? Vikram was honest enough with himself to admit that he had been initially shocked by the difference between the woman in the photo and the woman he met. But what had truly captured his interest, his admiration, and now his growing affection, was her mind, her spirit, her whole way of being in the world. The next day, Vikram couldn't concentrate on work. The revelation from the previous night kept playing in his mind. He canceled his afternoon meetings and drove to a small park near his office, needing space to think. He had been falling for Aisha over the past weeks. That much he had admitted to himself. But knowing that she had deliberately tested him, had researched him thoroughly before agreeing to the match, added a new dimension to their relationship. She wasn't just accepting what fate handed her. She was actively shaping her future, making informed choices about who would share her life. That evening, he called Aisha and asked if they could meet. They arranged to have dinner at a quiet restaurant the following night. When he picked her up, she looked particularly lovely in a deep green outfit, her hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders. You look beautiful, he said as she got into his car. Thank you, she replied, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. You look nice too. At the restaurant, they were seated in a secluded corner. After they ordered, Vikram took a deep breath, gathering his courage. Aisha, there's something I need to tell you. Her eyes widened slightly. That sounds serious. Is everything all right? Yes, everything's fine. It's just, I overheard something I wasn't meant to hear, he admitted, watching her expression carefully. I was at Arjun's construction site last night. It's across from your house. You were talking with your sister in the sitting room. Aisha's face froze, then flushed deeply. Oh, she said quietly. I see. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, Vikram hastened to add. But I heard what you said about the photo, about it being a test. She looked down at her hands, embarrassed. I'm sorry about that. It was childish of me. No, Vikram said, reaching across the table to take her hand. It was clever, and I failed the test spectacularly, didn't I? A small smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. Well, you didn't pass with flying colors. In my defense, I was in the middle of a conference call when I looked at your photo, Vikram said. But that's no excuse. I should have paid more attention. And I should have been more mature about the whole thing, Aisha admitted. But I've spent my entire life being judged, either for my appearance or for being too educated for a woman. I wanted a husband who would see beyond both those things, who would value me as a complete person. And do I? Vikram asked softly. Value you as a complete person? Aisha looked up at him, her eyes serious. I think you're learning to, she said. Just as I'm learning to see you as more than just a successful businessman. The waiter arrived with their food, interrupting the moment. As they ate, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. A book Aisha was reading, a new project Vikram was considering. But underneath the casual talk, Vikram felt a new understanding growing between them. After dinner, as they walked along a nearby promenade, Vikram gathered his courage again. I also heard what you said about your feelings, that they're evolving. Aisha stopped walking, looking out over the water. Yes, she said quietly. They are. Mine too, Vikram admitted. When my parents first suggested this match, I agreed out of duty. I didn't expect... He gestured vaguely, struggling to find the right words. You didn't expect to actually like me, Aisha supplied, a teasing note in her voice. I didn't expect to find myself thinking about you all the time, Vikram said honestly. I didn't expect to look forward to seeing you more than anything else in my day. I didn't expect to find someone who challenges me, inspires me, makes me want to be better. Aisha's eyes widened at his words. For once she seemed at a loss for a response. Too much? Vikram asked, suddenly uncertain. No, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Not too much, just unexpected. They stood in silence for a moment, the night air cool around them, the distant sounds of the city creating a gentle backdrop to the momentous shift happening between them. So where does this leave us? Aisha finally asked. We're still going ahead with the engagement, still following the path our parents set for us, but it feels different now. It is different, Vikram said firmly. We're choosing each other now, not just accepting a family arrangement. At least that's how I feel. He looked at her questioningly, suddenly vulnerable. Is that how you feel too? Aisha considered his words, her eyes thoughtful. Yes, she said at last. I'm choosing you, Vikram Malhotra, despite your initial lack of interest in my photo. She smiled then, that warm, genuine smile that made his heart race. Or perhaps because of it, because it led us here to this moment, where we're seeing each other for who we truly are. Vikram felt a weight lift from his chest, a tension he hadn't even realized he was carrying. I'm choosing you too, Aisha Khan, and I promise to keep seeing you, all of you, for the rest of our lives. As they continued their walk, hand in hand now, Vikram marveled at the strange turns life could take. He had agreed to this match thinking it was merely a business arrangement, a duty to his family. He had barely glanced at a blurry photo, making assumptions that couldn't have been more wrong. And now, just weeks later, he couldn't imagine his life without this remarkable woman by his side. The revelation of Aisha's deliberate test might have angered another man, might have made him feel manipulated or tricked, but to Vikram, it only underscored what he already knew, that Aisha was intelligent, strategic, and unwilling to leave her future to chance. These were the very qualities that drew him to her, that made him respect and admire her more with each passing day. As they reached his car, Vikram turned to Aisha. I'm glad I failed your test, he said with a smile. And I'm even more glad that you gave me a second chance to see you clearly. I'm glad too, Aisha replied softly, more glad than I can say. In the moonlight, her eyes shining with warmth and promise, she had never looked more beautiful to him. And this time, Vikram made sure to look, really look, and appreciate the extraordinary woman he was lucky enough to be marrying. Not just her face, but her mind, her heart, her entire being. The woman he had once dismissed with a glance was now the center of his world, and that, he thought as they drove back through the quiet streets of Lahore, was the most unexpected and wonderful revelation of all. The days leading up to their formal engagement ceremony were filled with a new kind of energy for Vikram. The man who had once lived and breathed work now found himself daydreaming in the middle of important meetings, checking his phone for messages from Aisha, and leaving the office at reasonable hours to spend time with her. The transformation wasn't lost on those around him. His mother commented on it one evening when he stopped by his parents' house for dinner. "You seem lighter, Beta," she said, watching him help himself to more food, something the usually distracted Vikram rarely did. "More present," Vikram smiled. "Do I?" His father looked up from his plate. "You've always been so serious, so focused on the business. It's good to see you enjoying life a bit more." "I think that's Aisha's influence," his mother said with a knowing smile. "She brings out a different side of you." Vikram couldn't argue with that. Aisha did bring out a different side of him, a side he hadn't even known existed. With her, he found himself laughing more, noticing the world around him more, caring about things beyond profit margins and business deals. The day after his dinner with his parents, Vikram did something unprecedented. He blocked off an entire day in his calendar for personal time. His assistant nearly fell out of her chair when he told her. "A whole day? No meetings at all?" she asked, clearly checking to see if he was running a fever. "Not one," Vikram confirmed. "And I won't be taking calls either unless it's an absolute emergency. May I ask what's the occasion, sir?" "Research," Vikram said with a smile that left his assistant even more confused. The research involved driving to a small village about 2 hours outside Lahore, where Aisha was visiting a community water project she had helped design during her doctoral studies. She had mentioned it in passing during one of their conversations, her eyes lighting up as she described the simple but effective rainwater harvesting system that had transformed the village's agricultural capabilities. When Vikram arrived, unannounced, Aisha was in the middle of speaking with a group of local farmers. She was dressed simply, her hair tied back in a practical bun, her hands gesturing enthusiastically as she explained something about water flow rates. She looked up as his car approached, her expression shifting from surprise to pleasure. "Vikram, what are you doing here?" she asked as he joined her. "I wanted to see your project," he said simply. "You spoke about it with such passion I had to see it for myself." Her face softened. "You came all this way just for that?" "It seemed important to you," he said. "So it's important to me too." For the rest of the day, Vikram followed Aisha around the village, listening as she explained the water system, the challenges they had faced, and the improvements still needed. He watched how the villagers respected her, how even the older men, traditionally reluctant to accept a young woman's authority, listened carefully to her suggestions and sought her advice. As the afternoon wore on, Vikram found himself drawn into discussions about how his company might help expand the project to neighboring villages. Ideas flowed freely between them, each building on the other's suggestions, their different areas of expertise complementing each other perfectly. "You two make quite a team," one of the village elders commented as they shared a simple meal in the community hall that evening. "The practical idealist and the idealistic businessman," Aisha laughed. "Is that how you see us, uncle?" The old man nodded sagely. "He has the resources, you have the vision. Together there is much you could accomplish." On the drive back to Lahore, with the setting sun painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Vikram glanced at Aisha in the passenger seat. She was looking out the window, a small smile playing on her lips, lost in thought. "The elder was right," Vikram said. "We do make a good team." Aisha turned to him. "We do," she agreed. "Today was unexpected but wonderful. Thank you for coming." "I should be thanking you," Vikram said, "for opening my eyes to possibilities I never considered before." "Like what?" "Like using Malhotra Development's resources for projects that might not maximize profit, but would maximize impact," he said. "Like thinking beyond luxury apartments to community-centered developments. Like balancing success with purpose." Aisha studied his face in the fading light. "And is that something you want? To change the focus of your business?" Vikram considered her question carefully. 6 weeks ago, he would have dismissed the idea outright. Business was business, charity was charity, and the two didn't mix. But now, having seen the impact of Aisha's work, having felt the satisfaction of contributing to something truly meaningful, "Yes," he said, surprising himself with his certainty. "Yes, it is. Not abandoning our core business, but expanding it, redirecting it, making a profit while making a difference." "Your board might have something to say about that," Aisha pointed out. Vikram grinned. "My board works for me, not the other way around. Besides, I think I can convince them that sustainable development is the future. The market is changing. Consumers are more conscious of environmental impact. We can position ourselves ahead of the curve. Always the businessman, Aisha teased. With new priorities. Vikram replied seriously. Thanks to you. Aisha reached across and squeezed his hand. I didn't change you, Vikram. I just helped you see parts of yourself that were already there, waiting to be discovered. The next week was a whirlwind of activity. During the day, Vikram threw himself into researching sustainable development practices, meeting with his management team to discuss a potential new direction for the company, and even reaching out to environmental consultants to audit their current projects. In the evenings, he spent time with Aisha, sometimes discussing business ideas, sometimes just enjoying each other's company. They attended family dinners together, went for walks along the river, and once, to the surprise of everyone who knew him, Vikram even took an entire Sunday off to attend a classical music concert that Aisha had mentioned wanting to see. Who are you, and what have you done with my friend? Joked Arjun when they ran into each other at a business function. The Vikram I know would never willingly sit through 3 hours of classical music. Maybe you didn't know me as well as you thought, Vikram replied with a smile. But the truth was, Vikram was discovering new aspects of himself every day, a capacity for joy he had forgotten, an interest in the world beyond his office, a desire to use his wealth and influence for something more meaningful than just accumulating more wealth and influence. 3 days before the engagement ceremony, Vikram called a meeting of his company's board of directors. His proposal was bold. A new division of Malhotra Developments focused entirely on sustainable housing projects, both luxury and affordable, with a portion of profits dedicated to community water projects in rural areas. This is quite a departure from our usual business model, one of the older board members commented. What brought this on? Vikram took a deep breath. Let's call it a personal evolution, he said. I've come to believe that we have a responsibility to do more than just make money. We have the resources and expertise to make a real difference in people's lives while still maintaining profitability. He went on to present a detailed business plan, complete with market analysis, projected costs and returns, and case studies of similar initiatives by other companies. He had spent late nights preparing it, wanting to show the board that this wasn't just an emotional decision but a sound business strategy. To his surprise and relief, the board was receptive. There were questions, concerns, requests for more detailed projections, but by the end of the meeting there was a tentative agreement to move forward with a pilot project. I never thought I'd see the day when Vikram Malhotra would be advocating for social responsibility over maximum profit, his father's old friend and board member Mr. Kapoor said as they were leaving. Your father would be proud, would he? Vikram asked, genuinely curious. His father had always been a traditional businessman, focused on growth and market share. Of course, Mr. Kapoor said. He always said the measure of a man isn't in how much wealth he accumulates, but in what he does with it. I think he'd be pleased to see you finding purpose beyond just expanding the company. That evening, Vikram met Aisha for dinner and shared the news about the board meeting. Her face lit up with excitement as he described the pilot project and the board's tentative approval. That's wonderful, Vikram. I'm so proud of you for taking this step. I couldn't have done it without you, he said. Your passion, your expertise, your whole way of looking at the world, it's changed how I see things. Aisha shook her head. I may have been the catalyst, but this transformation is all yours, Vikram. You've always had this capacity for vision and purpose. You just needed something or someone to help you recognize it. After dinner, they walked in a nearby park, the night air cool and fragrant with jasmine. Vikram found himself thinking about how much had changed in such a short time. 6 weeks ago, he had been a different man, focused solely on business, viewing his arranged marriage as just another obligation to fulfill, dismissing Aisha based on a single blurry photo. Now, he couldn't imagine his life without her, not just because of her beauty, which he now appreciated fully, but because of the way she challenged him, supported him, made him want to be a better version of himself. What are you thinking about? Aisha asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. About change, Vikram said. About how sometimes the things we think we don't want turn out to be exactly what we need. Aisha smiled. Like an arranged marriage to a woman whose photo you barely glanced at? Exactly like that, Vikram agreed with a laugh. Though in my defense it was a very misleading photo. It served its purpose, Aisha said with a mischievous glint in her eye. It revealed something important about both of us. My insecurity about being valued for my mind rather than my appearance, and your initial indifference to the personal aspects of our arrangement. And now? Vikram asked, drawing her closer. Now we're both seeing more clearly, Aisha said softly. We're seeing each other. Not just faces or credentials or family backgrounds, but the real people beneath all that. And what do you see when you look at me now? Vikram asked, suddenly vulnerable. Aisha reached up to touch his face, her eyes serious. I see a man of depth and complexity. A man with vision and purpose, with the courage to change and grow. A man I'm increasingly glad to be marrying. Her words wrapped around Vikram's heart like a warm embrace. And I see a woman of extraordinary intelligence and compassion, he said. A woman who has opened my eyes to new possibilities, who makes me want to be better than I am. A woman I can't believe I almost overlooked. In that moment, under the stars in a jasmine-scented garden, Vikram felt a certainty he had never experienced before. The arranged marriage that had begun as a family obligation, a business arrangement, a duty to fulfill, had transformed into something he wanted with his whole heart. The next day, Vikram did something he had never done before. He left work in the middle of the day to go shopping. Not for anything business-related, but for a gift for Aisha. He wanted to give her something before the engagement ceremony, something personal, from him to her, not part of the formal exchange of gifts between families. He spent hours searching for the perfect gift, rejecting the usual options of jewelry or perfume as too impersonal. Finally, in a small specialty shop, he found it. A beautifully bound journal made of handcrafted paper, with pressed flowers embedded in the cover. It reminded him of Aisha, beautiful, unique, practical, yet special. He had the shopkeeper wrap it in simple paper, declining the offer of elaborate ribbons and bows. That evening, he went to the Khan residence to deliver the gift. Aisha seemed surprised to see him. Vikram, I thought we weren't meeting until tomorrow for the family dinner. We weren't, he said, but I wanted to give you this, just from me to you, separate from all the formal engagement gifts. Aisha took the package, a curious smile on her face. What is it? Open it and see. She carefully unwrapped the paper, revealing the journal. Her fingers traced the pressed flowers on the cover, her expression softening. It's beautiful, she said. But why? For your ideas, Vikram explained. For all those brilliant thoughts about sustainability and water conservation and changing the world. I thought you might like a special place to record them. Aisha looked up at him, her eyes shining with emotion. This is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me, she said. Thank you, Vikram. There's a note inside, Vikram said, suddenly nervous. He had written it in a moment of uncharacteristic openness, and now wondered if it was too much, too soon. Aisha opened the journal to the first page, where Vikram had written a short message. To Aisha, whose mind I admire, whose heart I'm coming to know, and whose presence in my life is the most unexpected and wonderful gift. Thank you for seeing beyond the businessman to the man beneath. I'm looking forward to our journey together. Vikram. Aisha read it once, then again, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Vikram feared he had overstepped, been too emotional, too revealing. Then she looked up at him, and the warmth in her eyes dispelled all his doubts. I'm looking forward to our journey too, she said softly. More than I ever thought possible when this arrangement began. She stepped closer and, in a gesture that felt both surprising and entirely natural, kissed him lightly on the cheek. Thank you for transforming from the indifferent businessman to the man I see before me now, she whispered. In that moment, with the scent of jasmine from Aisha's garden surrounding them, and the warmth of her kiss still lingering on his cheek, Vikram knew that the transformation was complete. He had gone from viewing marriage as a duty to seeing it as a gift, from dismissing Aisha based on a blurry photo to cherishing every facet of her being, from focusing solely on business success to seeking a life of meaning and purpose, and he knew with a certainty that ran bone deep that this transformation was just the beginning of the journey they would take together. The engagement ceremony was a blend of traditional customs and personal touches that reflected both families' values. Held in the garden of a historic hotel in Lahore, the event brought together relatives, friends, and business associates from both sides. Vikram, dressed in formal attire, found himself uncharacteristically nervous as he waited for Aisha to arrive. Relax, cousin, Raj whispered, noticing Vikram's tense posture. "You look like you're about to negotiate a hostile takeover, not get engaged to a woman you're actually falling for." Vikram tried to smile, but his nerves remained. This wasn't business anxiety. This was personal, emotional, unfamiliar territory. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, something mattered to him more than contracts and profit margins. When Aisha entered the garden with her family, Vikram felt his breath catch. She was dressed in a traditional outfit in deep red and gold, her hair adorned with flowers, her expression a mixture of shyness and quiet joy. Their eyes met across the crowded garden, and everything else seemed to fade away. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of rituals, blessings, and congratulations. Vikram went through the motions automatically. His awareness focused entirely on the woman beside him, on the subtle pressure of her hand when it touched his, on the soft curve of her smile when she glanced his way. Later, as they stood together receiving guests' blessings, an elderly aunt of Aisha's approached them. "So this is the man who nearly missed the treasure right in front of him," she said with a knowing smile, speaking low enough that only they could hear. "Aisha told me about your little photo trick, my dear." "Very clever," Aisha blushed. "Kala, please, no, it's good to test a man's character," the old woman insisted. "And better still that he passed the real test even if he failed the first one." "The real test?" Vikram asked, curious despite his embarrassment. "Seeing the true worth of a person beyond first impressions," the aunt said, patting his arm. "Many men never learn that lesson. You're lucky you learned it before the wedding, not after years of marriage." As she moved on to greet other guests, Vikram turned to Aisha. "Your family knows about the photo?" "Just call it Jamila," Aisha assured him. "She's always been my confidant. Don't worry, your reputation as a sharp businessman is intact with everyone else." Vikram laughed. "I'm not sure I care about that reputation as much as I used to." The weeks following the engagement were filled with wedding preparations, but also with work, a different kind of work than Vikram had ever done before. Together with Aisha, he began developing plans for the new sustainability division of Malhotra Developments. They converted one of the conference rooms in his office into their workspace, covering the walls with maps, plans, and charts. Vikram brought in key members of his team to work with them, while Aisha invited colleagues from her environmental network to consult on specific aspects of the projects. The first initiative they tackled was expanding the village water project that Vikram had visited. Using his business connections and Aisha's technical knowledge, they developed a plan to bring sustainable water systems to 10 additional villages in the region, with a long-term goal of creating a model that could be replicated across Pakistan. One evening, as they were working late in their makeshift project room, Vikram looked up from the financial projections he was reviewing to watch Aisha. She was bent over a technical drawing, making notes in the margins, her brow furrowed in concentration. The sight filled him with a warmth that had nothing to do with pride of ownership or business satisfaction, and everything to do with admiration and growing love. "What?" Aisha asked, looking up to find him watching her. "Nothing," Vikram said with a smile. "Just appreciating the view." She rolled her eyes, but her cheeks flushed with pleasure. "Are you talking about the water filtration diagrams or me?" "Both are equally captivating," he teased. "But if I had to choose..." Aisha threw a crumpled piece of paper at him, laughing. "Get back to work, Mr. Malhotra. These villages need water more than I need compliments." Their easy banter, the natural flow of ideas between them, the way they challenged and supported each other, it all confirmed what Vikram had been feeling with increasing certainty. Their arranged match was turning into a true partnership, one based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine affection. As the wedding day approached, Vikram found himself thinking less about the ceremony itself and more about the life they would build together afterward. The traditional luxurious honeymoon that his parents expected them to take, a tour of Europe's most exclusive destinations, held little appeal compared to the work they were doing together. 1 week before the wedding, during a rare moment alone in his parents' garden, Vikram brought up the subject with Aisha. "What would you think about changing our honeymoon plans?" he asked. "Instead of Paris and Rome, what if we visited some of the rural communities where we're planning projects? We could combine it with a few days at that eco-resort on the coast that you mentioned." Aisha looked at him in surprise. "You'd rather visit work sites than see the Eiffel Tower and the Colosseum?" "I've seen them before. Vikram said with a shrug. On business trips. They're impressive, but I'd rather spend that time doing something meaningful with you. Something that matters to both of us. A slow smile spread across Aisha's face. Who are you and what have you done with the Vikram Malhotra I was told about? The ruthless businessman who cares only about the bottom line. Vikram laughed. I think he got lost somewhere between a blurry photo and a brilliant woman who showed him a different way to measure success. Well, I like this version better, Aisha said, taking his hand. And yes, I'd much rather visit our project sites than shop on the Champs-Élysées. But what will our families say? They'll adapt, Vikram said confidently, just like I did. The wedding celebrations lasted 3 days following traditional Pakistani customs with all the color, music, food, and joy that entailed. Through it all, Vikram found himself more present, more engaged than he had ever been at a social event. Rather than checking his phone for messages or thinking about work, he was fully immersed in each moment, especially those shared with Aisha. During the final ceremony, as they sat side by side while relatives and religious leaders offered blessings and advice, Vikram glanced at his bride. Behind her veil, he caught glimpses of her expressive eyes, sometimes solemn, sometimes twinkling with suppressed laughter when an elderly uncle gave particularly old-fashioned marriage advice. In those moments, Vikram marveled at how close he had come to missing this, to dismissing this remarkable woman based on a cursory glance at an unflattering photo. How empty his life would have been without her in it. After the wedding, their working honeymoon raised eyebrows among their social circle, but neither Vikram nor Aisha cared. They spent 2 weeks visiting rural communities, meeting with local leaders, engineers, and environmental experts, refining their plans for sustainable development projects. In the evenings, they stayed at small local inns or occasionally, with welcoming village families who insisted on hosting the important couple from the city. It was during one such evening, sitting on the roof of a village elder's home under a vast starlit sky, that Aisha turned to Vikram with a serious expression. Are you happy? She asked. With this life we're creating? It's so different from what you were used to. Vikram considered her question carefully. The last few months had indeed been a radical departure from his previous existence. Instead of focusing solely on luxury developments and profit margins, he was now dividing his time between the core business and their new sustainability initiatives. His days were longer, the challenges more complex, the rewards less tangible than before. I've never been happier, he said finally with absolute conviction. Before you I was successful, but empty somehow. I was accumulating wealth and status without any real purpose behind it. Now every day has meaning. Every project has impact beyond the financial statements. He took her hand, marveling at how natural that gesture had become. What about you? Is this what you wanted when you agreed to marry me? Aisha smiled, squeezing his hand. It's more than I dared hope for. I thought at best we might develop a cordial relationship with mutual respect. I never expected a true partnership. Vikram supplied, yes, she said softly, a partnership in every sense of the word. Upon their return to Lahore, they moved into a new home, not the lavish mansion Vikram had initially planned to build, but a thoughtfully designed house that incorporated the sustainable technologies they were advocating in their projects. Solar panels, rainwater harvesting systems, natural cooling methods, and gardens that provided both beauty and food became features of the Malhotra residence, turning it into a showcase for their vision of eco-friendly luxury. As the months passed, their personal and professional lives became increasingly intertwined. Aisha took on an official role at Malhotra Developments, heading the new sustainability division, while Vikram continued to oversee the company's overall operations. Together, they developed a reputation in Pakistan's business community as pioneers in sustainable development. Their first major project, a mixed-income housing development that incorporated state-of-the-art environmental technologies while remaining affordable for middle-class families, won international recognition. Journalists began requesting interviews. Universities invited them to speak, and government officials sought their input on environmental policies. Did you ever imagine this is where we'd end up? Vikram asked Aisha one evening, as they reviewed a feature article about their work in a prestigious international business magazine. When our parents first arranged this match? Aisha laughed, shaking her head. Never. I thought you'd be absorbed in your business while I pursued my environmental work separately. I never thought we'd create something new together. Something better than either of us could have done alone, Vikram added. The article had dubbed them the Green Revolutionaries of Pakistani real estate, highlighting how they were transforming urban development practices not just in Pakistan but potentially across South Asia. It included a photograph of them standing together at their latest project site looking at plans, their expressions serious but animated, clearly engaged in discussion. Vikram studied the photo, thinking about how far they had come from that first blurry picture that had nearly derailed their future before it began. In this image, there was no pretense, no test, no deception, just two people working together with shared purpose and evident connection. What are you thinking about? Aisha asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. About pictures, Vikram said with a smile, and how sometimes they tell the truth and sometimes they don't, but this one, he tapped the magazine photo. This one captures exactly who we are together. As their first anniversary approached, Vikram planned a surprise for Aisha. Without telling her, he had been working with her former academic advisors and colleagues to establish a scholarship fund for young women pursuing studies in environmental engineering. The Aisha Khan Scholarship would provide full funding for education, as well as guaranteed internships at Malhotra Development's Sustainability Division. When he presented the official documentation to her over a quiet dinner at home, Aisha was speechless, tears forming in her eyes. I don't know what to say.